We have answers within us. We're not broken. We don't need to be fixed. We just need to be healed.
Welcome to Control Chaos. I'm your host, Shana, and this is one of my longtime colleagues and friends, Sheri Rowland. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Kind of introduce yourself.
Oh God. Well, today I have 40 years sober. And yeah, I'm like,
Congrats!
40 years? How did I do that? Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah, and I've just been in the recovery field forever, it seems like, either in my own recovery or working with other people in their recovery. And, I really think that me being in the field all this long is how I got 40 years sober, you know? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think when you're in the field and you see it over and over and over again, and so many women, showing me constantly of what it was like when I first got sober,
Yeah,
I need to remember that because 40 years later, you forget. It's like childbirth. You forget how painful it is.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we worked together at a treatment center. It seems like forever and ever ago. For
I
me,
know.
for me working in treatment at first, it was really great because I was like, oh my God, I'm getting all these skills that help and getting to see these women and, not wanting to go back to that. But after a while, it was super stressful when you're not taking care of yourself, right? So taking a break was so amazing. But then it was you get this calling, this God calling, okay, you're not doing what you want to do. It's time to go back. So after I kind of took care of myself, got myself together, and I'm almost at 3 years again now,
Awesome.
I'm back to it. So I'm so excited. And
Yeah.
you have your own coaching kind of business going on. You do people inpatient or who have just gotten out of inpatient, and you do some coaching. Can you
Yeah.
tell us what that looks like, kind of?
So, to me, the difference between therapy and coaching is therapy is dealing a lot with the past, and recovery coaching is more dealing about what's right here, right now, and where do I want to be. So it's more action oriented, I think. And I think there's a place for both, actually. You see trauma and addiction go hand in hand. And if you see people that aren't able to stay sober, they're not dealing with trauma that's underneath all that. And so there are sometimes clients need therapy rather than coaching, or I have some that do both. You can do both at the same time. But I think that's a lot of it is if they haven't dealt with their underlying traumas, then it's
Mhm.
very difficult to stay sober. So you see these chronic relapsers, that haven't dealt with that issue. But, coming out of treatment, it's more about getting them a solid foundation under their feet and then, looking at where they want to take their life and really helping them lay out some steps to get them there. And so I
I
love both, actually. You know, and I loved what you said about taking a break because I have told people that many times. It's like this field is difficult. It's a difficult field. We don't see a lot of rewards, especially inpatient treatment. But, I've done that many times where I'm just like burnt out. I'm not really doing a good job, not treating myself like I want to be treated. And so I'll pull back, take care of myself. And then God's like, okay, we need you over here now. And then okay, here I go. So I go over there and do that for, I'm probably good for about 2 years. And then it's
right.
time for break. And then, God wants me somewhere else. It's like, this is my calling. I have been pulled in this direction so many times. There's no denying that this is my calling. It is my God-given gift.
But every once in a while, I think everybody does need a little mental health break. I thought what you said about trauma is amazing. And I think that's something that a lot of people miss, even people who work in treatment. Because even myself, I would say all the time, I've been to treatment so many times. I've been,
Yeah.
sober living. I've been in, outpatient programs, and
Yeah.
I want to stop drinking and use it. Why can't I figure it out? I wanted it bad. And, I think there's this conception, in the rooms, even of AA, and I love AA, but this conception, if you don't get sober, you just don't want it, or you're not working hard enough. And I struggle with that because I feel like there's times when I tried so hard and it was almost like I couldn't. But that
Mhm.
piece that was missing was dealing with trauma, and trauma that I didn't even necessarily know I had until I
Yeah.
got down to it and started talking, because I would think because I wasn't like, beat up as a child or like huge, huge things, that I didn't
Yeah.
have
Big T.
trauma. And that's not always the case. And I didn't know
Right.
that even through many, many stays.
Mhm.
So can you tell us like a little bit about what trauma looks like and how it can be different? It's not necessarily like a end of the what you would think of as an end of the world thing, right? At this time in your life.
Yeah. So we talk about the big T and the little T. So the big T's are the big traumas, where sexual abuse, car wreck, deaths, physical abuse. It's all the big things that we typically think is trauma. But there's a lot of underlying traumas that we call the little T's. And that can be, bullying at school, or the way a parent talked to you, or, you got left out of a party and didn't get invited. There's so many little things like that affect each one of us differently. I can see one that can totally, handle that. And then there's another where little things like that bother them deeply. And so it's all individualized to each person and how they've received it. And I love the guy that's so popular with trauma. Dadgummit, it'll come around. It'll come around. Anyway, but he talks a lot about it. It's not so much what happened to you, it's what you did with it. And we internalize what happened to us about
Like how
us.
we received it, kind of.
Yeah, how
Yeah.
we internalize. And he says it's more about not having someone to talk to in that moment or in that time, rather than what happened to us.
Yeah, and I think also like age is a big thing, right? Like when something that you might think of as small now might
Yeah.
not have been small as like a kid, so it can just be stuck as like trauma in your body even, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
how, so this is a question which I don't even know if you'll know the answer to this, but I feel like you're like a badass, so you should know. When people say that trauma is like held up in your body or whatever, what does that exactly mean? And like, how does it come out by like therapy and that type of stuff? Like, how do you get rid of that? And what does that actually mean?
Yeah. So, yeah, we know that trauma is stored in our body. And there's studies coming out now that we hold trauma from 7 generations in the past. Yeah. So, some of our trauma that we hold in our body isn't even ours to be holding. And, it takes a really good therapist to be able to sort through some of this stuff with a patient. But, if you think about how, and I know in the recovery field they don't like the word trigger, but in the therapy world we do use the word trigger, that there are certain tones of voices, the way somebody looks at you, the way their body posture is, the smell of someone or smell of alcohol. There's things around us that will trigger our stuff from the past, and it happens physically first, and then it's a thought or a memory, because
Right.
their breath, their heart speeds up, the heart rate, or the breathing, or they tense up. And so it happens in the body first. That's how we know it's stored in the body. And, I do EMDR and I do brain spotting, which are great techniques to work people through their own trauma. And a lot of times it is a physical sensation first. And so, yeah, you've got to work through that. It's like I had one the other day that every time she smells smoke, it takes her back to her house on fire.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so crazy. I know, like, as far as myself, like, anxiety would always come as like a physical thing. Like, honest to God, I would feel like I was going to pass out or I was going to die, have a heart attack. And when I was younger, I used to go in all the time and they would just, give you some medicine. They're like, calm down. It's an anxiety attack. You're fine. Right. And I'd be like, but there's nothing wrong with me. Like,
Yeah.
so I never figure out, like, I couldn't piece it together, but I think it is just trauma that stays in the body. And when you have, a panic attack, that's how it comes out, is physically, right? And
Mhm.
once I started doing some of like trauma work and things like that, therapy, I just don't get those anymore. And it's
Yeah.
funny because I really would think that I was dying. And
Mhm.
there's like anxiety because you have anxiety because you have anxiety.
Mhm. And
The worst.
I think that's how my addiction actually started. I think I had an anxiety disorder before, and I knew if I drank, I could take care of the anxiousness and the anxiety. But then the cycle is the next day when I woke up with a hangover, there was that anxiety even worse. So I was in this circle where I just could not get out of it.
And that was
Could
a
not.
where my anxiety came from. And I would always go back. And like you said, it would be like 30 days, 60 days, and I couldn't hold like a long time together. And I would always think like I'm just one of those people who just can't get sober. And it's crazy because now, like, it's not even a thought, right? Like, it's once you deal with certain things and once you have like that toolbox, it really does go away. And it's crazy to think. And I think that's why I love being in this field is like you can really tell somebody that like you can have a life, right? Like it doesn't have to be like this forever because people really do think that this is just them,
Mhm. Yeah,
right?
and don't want to talk about it either because, if I talk about it, then people are going to, judge me about it or think differently about me and so a lot of times you see people in their addictions are just so alone.
Yeah, and it's crazy because even like with other addicts and alcoholics, you'll still hold back, right? You still feel like, okay, they might know a little bit, but they don't know it all. Or maybe I can tell them like the funny, crazy party stories, but I'm not
Mhm.
going to tell them that I was like sitting at home thinking of this and it was
Right.
ruminating all night because that's really embarrassing, right? Like, why would I
Yeah.
be thinking that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy to feel like even the people you can trust, you don't trust, and not because of them, but because of how you feel, right?
Yeah. And, going to AA or some type of support group, a lot of times, they don't understand either. They're just focused on the addiction part, not on any of the, somatic stuff, as we call it somatic stuff. And, I've got several clients that I've helped work through their traumas, and they didn't even know what it was linked to or what the trauma was. But getting someone to slow down enough to really drop into their body and go to where they hold those feelings and emotions, a lot of times the memory will come back, or we don't even need to know what happened. Sometimes we can drop into the feelings and the emotions and just, go back. When was the first time you ever felt that?
Right.
And kind of going back like that. And we don't need to know what happened, but a lot of times just by going back and feeling those emotions and acknowledging them that they're there, they lessen.
That's amazing. So
Uh-huh.
one of my favorite things about you and like how you do therapy, because obviously we've both worked with a lot of therapists and whatnot, counselors and treatment, but you and also Laura is a lot like this. You're very like, I don't know if the right word is like spiritually connected, but
Yeah.
very not just like textbook and this is what happens and this is what, you know what I mean? You're very connected to like your higher power, your higher self, even. So, can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that and like how, I don't know, what is your,
Yeah. Yeah.
what,
So I guess maybe talking about my daily rituals or
yeah,
what? Yeah. So I've always had a morning meditation where, I read something that's positive, either in recovery or personal development or spiritual. I kind of do both. I read Jesus Calling and then I read another one. And then I sit in meditation for 15 minutes. And then after that, then I journal for however long, either something that came up in my meditation or just a thought or an idea or just how crappy my day was yesterday or whatever. There's no structure really to my journaling, but I do try to at least put some feelings and emotions down on paper. And then
right,
at night, I try to kind of put a bow on my day and close out my day. And I write about the 4 G's. I call it the 4 G's. It's what were 4 things that were great today,
okay,
and then 4 things. What were some things that were glitches in my day that didn't quite go right, and
okay,
then am I grateful for 4 things that I'm grateful for, and then 4 goals for tomorrow.
okay. So wait, great goals, glitches.
Great
What was one?
glitches,
Okay,
then gratitudes,
gratitude. That's what I missed.
and the
Okay,
goals for tomorrow. And that just kind of puts a nice little bow on my day, allows me to go to sleep, and I sleep well when I do that. And I don't sleep so well when I don't.
I love that. I do
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
I think so. I'm super like ADD all over the place, and that was like part of my addiction too. Was like stimulants, right? I would do stimulants to like help me get it together, be able to get up and do what I wanted to do, and then alcohol take me down, right? Well,
Yeah.
I
I
found
totally get it.
Yeah. Well, I found that like people would always talk about meditation and journaling, and I wanted to run because I couldn't sit there and I felt like I couldn't do it right and I couldn't whatever. I'm
Yeah.
not super hyper, but my mind would be everywhere, right? And I found that I started just like got a notebook and started just writing. It started actually with my Bible, which is crazy. I started just writing my prayers down after I would read like a little teeny section and or like things that were bothering me in like literally like chicken scratch, right? Just to get it out of my head. And it like evolved from there. And same with meditation. When I was having anxiety, I would
Yeah.
put them in my ears and I would just lay down and listen. And I didn't even try to meditate. I would just try to listen to them. And
Mhm.
it just evolved. So I think it's cool how you think you can't do something or it's not going to work for you, but it does. And it complete like to this day, journaling makes me feel better because it's getting it out into the
Yeah.
world out of me, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you
Yeah.
go through that with your patients? Like when they're like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
How do you go?
I mean, let me kind of back up and talk about the meditation because I think that we do have that in our mind that, well, I'm not a good meditator because, I can't keep my mind still. Well, I mean, your mind is kind of like breathing. I mean, it just kind of goes wherever it wants to go sometimes, right? And so it's not about you not being a good meditator. It's about having a focus in your meditation, like a mantra or a word or just something that you can say over and over, and that kind of trains the mind to just be here right now, here right now, here right now, right? It's just bringing it back. But the more I fight it, the more my mind just goes in all different directions. So yeah, a lot of my clients will say, oh no, I can't meditate, my mind won't be still, and so I'm not going to. Well, no, I need you to. You need to, for it's part of your recovery, because I know for me, I can get so busy in my day, and if I don't give me some quiet time, I don't hear what God wants for me, or I don't hear, ideas or thoughts or a person I need to call, or, I just feel like that's when I'm able to hear. If
Yeah.
I'm busy and my mind's going, I don't hear, I just don't. And I just create 15 minutes. What's 15 minutes of my day to sit in silence? It's nothing.
Yeah, I also feel like it gets you ready and like, I don't want to say happy. I don't think that's the right word, but when I do that before I've done anything else kind of deal, or even just with my morning coffee, it's like time for myself. Like I feel like I've pampered myself a little bit or given
Yeah.
myself the grace to like wake up and not have to do 50 things, but like give myself time to like be here, be in the moment. What do I want to do today? What do I like that type of thing? Just getting up, right? We just usually get up, get ready, and go right to work or go right to getting our kids up, right into chaos.
Yeah.
And it's like not healthy sometimes, right? You want to like kind of like you start your car in the winter, right?
Yeah.
That's how I
Yeah. And I think it's a way to just honor yourself, right? It's kind of that analogy of you got to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you can put it on anybody else, right? And I think that's my oxygen in the morning, is just giving myself some time to just be with my higher power or God or universe or whatever, you believe in, but
yeah.
it's just honoring myself and giving that self to myself, because I know, my day is so different and so much better when I do that. And
Mhm.
that's not to say that I haven't gotten off track and not done it for a while. And then I catch myself like, things are not going well here. Well, what did you quit doing? And usually it's that, where I felt like I just didn't have time to do that. Well, I do. I'm in charge of my calendar and I'm in charge of my time. It's an excuse. Yeah.
Right. Chances are, most of the time, I don't know about you, but I'm not as busy as I think I am. Like, I spend a lot of time scrolling or doing this or that, especially if you're someone who does do stuff online, like work a lot online or from your computer. It's easy to be trying to work, but doing other things like just chilling
Yeah.
on Facebook. And then you're like, but I'm working. I've been working all day. I'm so busy. And I'm like, wait, I
Yeah.
really scrolling for an hour, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it gets
Yeah. And do you find yourself in that hour really comparing?
that's the worst.
Yes. Yes. And
So
that's what
let's
I get.
take a second and
I
talk. Can
myself.
you can you talk about that for us? Because that's a huge thing that causes
Yes.
people to not love themselves too. So what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I see it all the time, and it has no age limit either. It used to be the younger generation, and now it's across the board where people are just on their phones constantly and caught up in that comparison. I'm not pretty as these people I'm seeing, these women I'm seeing, or I don't get to travel like they do, or I don't have a successful business like they do, or a podcast, or whatever, and it's constantly looking at what I don't have rather than what I do have. And the less time I spend on social media, the less I have time to compare myself with somebody else and continue to find fault with myself or my business or whatever, and I don't want what they have, actually. If I'm honest with myself, I don't want what they have. Or if I do, have I been willing to do what it took for them to get where they're at? Sometimes we see people that are successful and we think they were successful overnight, and they haven't been. They've been working their ass off for years to get to where they are. So that's the flip side of that is, am I willing to do the work that they did to be where they're at? Sometimes no.
Right. And it's crazy because there's also this thing, and I know we say it, but I don't think we really hear it right, is that like Facebook, Instagram, all of that is like someone's highlight reel for the most part, except for if you look at mine, right? Mm-hmm. Mine is like all about my addiction and like real life, right? But like most people's are really like showing the things they're happy about and not even like trying to look so great all the time, but really it's Facebook. So you share the parties you're having, maybe the new car or purse you got. You're not sharing like, I just got in a screaming match with my husband for 9 hours, right?
Yeah.
And when it came to my mind about like doing this coaching thing on my own and whatnot, I was like, I don't think I could do that. Like, I don't even know how I would start. What if I'm not good enough? And then I started looking and I was like, there's a lot of people who do it, and why couldn't I, right? And I'm looking at their stuff and looking and not even comparing, but like I do have this experience, I do have that, and this is what you need to do. And when I stopped being like, oh, well, I don't know if I can, or I don't know, yeah, you have a lot of experience. You have to get up and work. You have to figure out how to get an LLC or how to, get stuff edited. You have to do the work. So somebody told me once, and I was like, whatever. And then I took it, that a lot of people who are out there doing what you want to do, whatever it is, maybe you want to be a music artist or whatever, they might not even have as much talent as you have. They've just got up and done it. And I was like, huh,
yeah.
it's crazy.
And
like,
I love what you did.
Right.
Yeah. And I love what you did about looking and finding evidence where it wasn't true, right? Because we all can do that, but it's taking the time to really find evidence where I have been successful, or I have had recovery time, or I have had, where you do have a lot to give, right?
Yeah.
It's like a fork in the road. Which way are you going to go?
Yeah. We put ourselves down a lot, and it's like, okay, well, these people have, been through problems or I'm sure they had drawbacks to starting things or whatever, and they've still done it, right? And if they can do it, you can too. It's just the work behind it. And are you willing to maybe put yourself out there and maybe even fail for a year or so and keep doing it, right? So it's just like if you want it, you have to go get it. And, that's something you hear your whole life.
Yeah.
But there's a time when it starts to like really click.
Yeah. I know. And you a lot to share, you really do. I mean, if you look at your life experiences, those have greatly, you have paid for those, and you come on the other side, and you have a lot to share. And recovery coaches are needed so bad right now. This issue, I've been in the recovery field for 40 years, but the problem has not gone away. It's never going to go away. It's gotten worse. We will always have a job.
Right. No, it's definitely gotten worse. And also the thing is that people are going to rehab and they're not changing for good. And nothing bad about rehab, because sometimes it works for people, sometimes it doesn't. And I learned, I was in rehab for 6 months once and got out, and I shit you not, I was drunk in 3 weeks and I had no idea what happened, right? And it was in the middle of like a court case for my children and stuff that meant so much to me, but I just couldn't, right? I couldn't figure out how to do it. And I think that there is something missing in a lot of centers, and that really is the part about trauma. I actually went to a counselor, a therapist, and I started talking to her, and it was like actually like recently, and found out so much stuff about myself. And I sat down and thought, like, how have I been to so many places and never really got treatment? Maybe like two or three like counseling sessions where they're like, what's going on? Like, but you more talk about what's going on now, right? Like, what are my kids doing while I'm here in this center? There was no like trauma therapy or things like that. And I was like almost flabbergasted when I talked to this therapist and got so much relief that why is that not more of a thing? Is that something you've noticed?
Yeah. I mean, I have two sides to that issue. Yes, it infuriates me to see some of the facilities out there.
Mhm.
I mean, I hate to say this, but I think it's a waste of time. I think it's a waste of either family's money or insurance money. If you are not giving those patients the best of the best treatment while they're there, you're doing them a disservice, because they do get caught up in it. Well, I've been 6 times, and yeah, I just can't get it. Well, I don't know if they've been to really shitty 6 times treatment facilities, or they just don't want it, or they haven't dealt with the issue. I mean, there's so much that's involved in that.
And
But yeah, it infuriates.
come in maybe with a wall up and you only have so many days. So there are barriers on the patient side too, and I absolutely understand that. There's also like when a patient comes in, they probably have, a CPS case, a drunk driving, 500 they're in there trying to talk to their lawyers. They're in there. There's so much stuff because you've literally wrecked and ran through your life. And then you're like,
Yeah.
okay, bye, I'm going to treatment. I'm going to get better. So when you get there, all these staff have like so much to deal with that I think sometimes the focus ends up on that kind of stuff and not as much on like, how did we get here? Right? Like, how did we get here?
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough balance for therapists when you've got them inpatient, because you're dealing with a lot of what they're going through right now, but also their past and their addiction. And you're dealing with a lot of stuff, and it's hard to sometimes decipher, what do we really need to be dealing with right now. Yeah, I mean, you've got to have some skills, to be able to figure this all out and every patient's different.
Well, they're mad because Jennifer stole their toothbrush, so you get like nothing out of the whole session.
Yes. Yeah. Some days those happen too. Yeah. Yeah. You're dealing with
So
behavior contracts.
But when I found my recovery, even though I had been to treatment 3 times, and actually I had went to some very good treatment centers with some amazing staff, right? I really do think that there is too much, and then there's not enough ongoing support after, right? Like I moved right out of treatment the last time into an apartment in the middle of Kerrville, knowing no one, with all 3 of my children.
Yeah.
Like, what was
Yeah.
I thinking? Like, what was
Yeah.
I thinking? Right?
And
Like,
who
I
was
moved
supposed
on
to
with
guide
life.
you? And who
Huh?
was supposed to guided you better in that moment?
Yeah.
You know, I think there is that lack of bridging that gap between treatment and sober living or moving back into the world. There has to be more support on the day they leave. And it's about setting that up ahead of time. Now, whether they follow through is a whole different story, but at least you've helped them make some connections before they even leave.
Mhm.
You know, super
Yeah,
important. Yeah.
definitely. I think that honestly, I would have never really found my recovery inside of treatment. I think it was something I had to do while being in real life because at the end of the day, like my kids don't have, they're like a father figure. Well, I'm married now, right? But they don't have, at the time, didn't have their dads or whatever involved. And it was like, my responsibilities were always going to come back to me when I came back home. So like
Mhm.
I had to learn how to deal with real life and work on myself and have support not to go back to doing the same thing. And I think
Yeah.
that a lot of people have that, right? Like a lot of people go back to regular life and they're like, wait a minute, it was easy when I had to go to bed at 8 o'clock and there was staff sitting downstairs holding my hairspray. But it's not so easy when the gas station's open all night and it's next door and I'm having a panic attack and I can't breathe and I feel like liquor will fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, in treatment, you're told what to do and where to be every hour on the hour, and then you go home to a family that maybe has done 1 or 2 hours of either a meeting or therapy, where you've been knocking it out 8, 10 hours a day for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, you
Mm-hmm.
know, going home to the same people, actually. And
Yeah.
that's difficult if the family's not doing what they need to be doing while somebody's in treatment, you
Right.
know?
So,
Yeah.
what is that you think that people, okay, if somebody came to you who has been a chronic relapser, what is it that your advice would be, or what would your plan be? What is your hope for people who feel like it's not gonna happen?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, number one, to never lose hope, right? There's always someone, some things that can help. There's always. And I think, whether, I don't know if it's inpatient or outpatient, the main thing is that you can't do it alone.
Right.
Because if you could do it alone, you would have already done it,
Yes.
right? You
And
would have
if
already done it.
it would have already been done. My biggest pet peeve is a lot of times it's put on like willpower. Like if you wanted it, you would have done it. If you wanted it, you would have just stopped. You blah blah blah. Like no, really, like for
Mhm.
sure, if it was willpower, it would have been done. That's not it. It's more
Yeah,
than that. And
yeah, yeah,
that people think
yeah.
a lot
Because
of that.
that's what they tell people. Well, just suck it up, just don't do it. Just don't, and it's not that easy. And the older we get, the harder it is, actually. It's so ingrained when that's all you've had for coping skills is to use.
Yep.
But
Like, yep.
it's just, don't lose hope. Find someone that can help you. Whether it's inpatient treatment, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a recovery coach, whether it's a sponsor, just, you've got to just find someone and hang on.
And all of them can help you too. Like relapsing, it's it really is something that gives you no hope or makes you feel like there's no end. But the truth is if you're relapsing, there's always something, there's always a tool, there's always something that's missing. And everybody's recovery and everybody's why is so different that like we think, and I love AA. I use the 12 steps still to this day. So nothing bad about AA, but we think you go to AA, this should fix you if you're an alcoholic. No, there's
Mm-mm.
so many things that you need to put together. And maybe AA might work perfectly for one person or a few, I'm sure a million people out there, right? But there's
Yeah.
people out there AA is not just going to work for. Like
Right.
maybe this person who AA worked perfectly for all alone was
Mhm.
it was like a connection problem, right? Like they needed people and support, and that's what they were missing. But you could be over here, and the reason you're using is because you have such bad trauma and you haven't dealt with it or don't even know what it is. Like there's
Mhm.
so many different reasons, and I think that people just some people do get the disease part, but they're like, it's a disease. This can fix it. Be done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not
Yeah. Yeah.
still here.
Yeah. And, I got sober in AA as well, but, there are many ways to get sober. I mean, AA is not the only way, but it was my way, and
Mhm.
obviously your way. And I think that some of the missing pieces with that is yes, AA has the 12 steps, but there's a way to do those 12 steps that's way deeper than just hitting the surface and reading the book. It's finding someone that has done the work with the steps to really help clear a lot of your underlying emotional stuff that's going on, where you need to forgive yourself and work through the steps and forgive others and ask for, make amends and all of that. But if you don't have somebody that can really take you deep on those steps, you're just hitting the surface on a lot of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh, for sure.
you're seeing the difference in the 12-step work.
For sure. I dealt with somebody one time that was super young, and she had gotten in an accident and hurt somebody, and it was like on her mind 24/7, and it was, a huge trauma. So it's like telling somebody like that, like AA should fix you. Like, there's so much more. And even when you do the 12 steps, like you said, there's like a way to run through the 12 steps real quick, and there's like a spiritual, like, actually going through it, doing your fifth step, doing your hour with God, like doing it with someone who's actually going to dig and who you trust and who you're not going to lie to, right? There's so much to it that it really can't just be a one size fits all. And I think a lot of people have that misconception that, like, well, I've already done what they said and that's it. So I'm like a lost cause, right? And I
Yeah.
think there's so many people out there that have so many different ways and so many different thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. And that whole spiritual awakening part,
Yeah.
I think that is the key to staying sober. If you don't have a spiritual awakening or some type of spiritual connection that comes with working the steps, I don't see people staying sober.
Agreed. Agreed. I actually was talking to someone about this the other day, and how it pretty much was a thing before that, you pick a higher power, and it could be like the doorknob, or it could be the AA group, or it could be, God or whatever. And I always say that, like, it's at the end of the day, it's your personal choice. But truthfully, for me, for a higher power to work, it needs to be a higher power. Say, like, if you believe in like the universe, or you believe in God, or you believe in, I don't just believe in Sheri Rowland. Like, that's not
Yeah.
going to work, right?
Yeah,
Sheri
don't
Rowland,
make God, please.
work, but I don't think you're going to cure me of everything. You might be able
Yeah.
to help me, but
Yeah.
so I kind of like call that part into question too, right? Is like, you got to believe there's something higher than you who's out there working too, right?
Yeah. 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 There's something that's running that show out there, right?
It's
There's something.
not me. It is not me. Not
Yeah.
today. Not ever.
Yeah. No, no, no. No.
So,
But,
two other
but
things I want to ask you. Okay, so right now in Facebook, Instagram land, there is so much about sobriety and recovery. And there's a lot of people who are, so I guess nowadays they're starting to say alcohol is almost like how cigarettes used to be, right? Like, it was really popular to smoke, it was really popular to do alcohol. Now you're finding out that there's like poison in alcohol, it's not good for you. So regular people who are not necessarily what they would consider alcoholics are starting to think like it's not good to drink, and I'm stopping drinking, and you don't have to go to AA, you don't have to do this, you can just, stop drinking and do this type of thing. And at first, okay, first of all, I love that people are, putting alcohol to rest, because it's not great for you. Even if you're like a moderate drinker, it's going to interfere sometimes, right?
Mhm.
But sometimes it's hard, because I feel like somewhere in there, when people who are really, really struggling, like, and can't get it together, look at that type of stuff, they're like, well, wait a minute, I should just be able to stop, right? And like, not have to do all this work. What's your thought on that? Have you seen that type of stuff? Have you seen, like, just,
I,
the everyday people quitting drinking?
yeah, I guess maybe that's not in my field right now, or Facebook doesn't know that I'm interested in any of that because I'm not seeing a lot of that. But I think we have a tendency to not realize that there are people out there that don't have a problem with alcohol. There
Yes,
really are.
it's
Um,
okay to quit drinking. And, that's an amazing thing if you decided you're a better mom, or it's just interfering with you. But somebody who has an actual addiction or alcoholism might actually struggle with that program that you're putting out there.
yeah, Yeah. No, I would struggle with it personally because I would be thinking, yeah, you may be able to do it, but you don't have my life.
Right. Yeah.
You had my life. You probably couldn't quit drinking like that, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what else was I going to ask you? Oh, I was going to ask you about your personal recovery. What did your addiction, alcoholism, what did your before story kind of look like?
Yeah. So I come from a family of alcoholics. You know, my dad was alcoholic. I would say my mom probably loved pain meds, you know, so she probably had an addiction too. There's eating disorders in my family. I mean, it's all kind of dysfunction. Let's just be honest, you know, and it goes back generations on both sides of the family. So who knows? I mean, there's this, you know, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Were you born alcoholic or did you become alcoholic? You know, I don't know, but it became a problem. And I sobered up after I had my three children, you know, and looking at them going, you know, I want to be a better mom. I want to be able to be more present for my kids. And I just knew I wasn't. And I got into, you know, experimenting with other drugs earlier in my life and like you're saying, amphetamines, I liked Coke and alcohol. But yeah, it was just one day I woke up and I thought, I can't do this. I came to a crossroad where I couldn't live another day drinking and I couldn't live another day without drinking.
I say
Right.
that all the time.
Yeah.
That's so,
It was
yeah.
it was a huge crossroad. And I knew I couldn't do it myself, you know. So I just checked myself into treatment and went to treatment. I'm a one and done. I don't know how. I think I got me the meanest badass sponsor in the very beginning. She looked 70 and I think she was probably 50 and she had like 25, 30 years sobriety, which I thought was a lifetime at that time, right? And I remember her saying to me, you know, kind of looking at me and my lifestyle and this and that. She was like, "Oh, honey, you're never going to make it." And I thought, "Watch this, bitch," you know?
I
And
love it. A little
I me off.
variety.
She probably knew what she was doing by pissing me off.
Knew what she was doing.
Yeah, yeah, she probably knew what she was doing. But anyway, it pissed me off big time. And so I went to 3 meetings every day for over a year.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Did you work? Did you
Weekend
have a job?
If on the weekends, you know, or we'd be out of town or something. But even when we traveled, I would find a meeting wherever I went. And I loved doing that because I always met new people and, you know, their meetings were so different than the ones in the valley. And
I
yeah,
love
yeah.
the one and
And
done 40 years.
yeah, one and done. I'm shocked at that actually.
I
But you know,
love
that's to
the
prove I've
podcast.
said that, you know, I can send somebody to the shittiest treatment facility, and if they want it, they'll get it.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can send somebody to the best and have the best therapist, the best treatment, the best programs, everything. And if they don't want it, you can't make them get it. You
Right.
just and I think it just came at a time where I didn't want that life anymore, you know, and I had lived that life all my life with an alcoholic father, you know, so it was like, I don't want to do this again to my kids.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
And I was desperate. I worked hard at not drinking. And I think, you know, me going to that many meetings for the first year, it kept me busy.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. It kept me busy and I needed to be busy, you know, and working with other women. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
started a group that we didn't have at that time. And, you know, I just jumped in and did what I needed to do. And my husband at the time, he didn't sober up till a year later. So I had a alcoholic that I was living with on a daily basis too. So that was another reason why I went,
That,
huh?
what was that like living with somebody who was drinking when you were trying not to? Was that
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was tough because our relationship was based, it even started with us drinking together, you know, and that was a lot of our relationship was drinking together and, you know, traveling and doing things. But I would leave little things on the bedside table for him to read. But, you know, he didn't jump in until like a year later, but it was pretty much an ultimatum. I was at the point where I knew I didn't want to live anymore with an alcoholic, you
and is
know.
he sober now? I know you guys aren't together, but
I don't think, I mean, I think he is as much as he thinks he is, but I
okay,
think he drinks wine every now and then.
fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that answer. much as he thinks he is or wants to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You call that sober? Okay.
Right. So,
Yeah.
is there anything that like you would like to leave people with regarding anything, depression, anxiety, whatever, addiction, all of that? Is there anything that you think is super important for people to know?
I think it goes back to just don't ever lose hope. Kind of my theme has always been the reason why I do what I do is so that another woman doesn't have to suffer in silence. Because
Yeah,
you've suffered in silence. And I think, the more that I share my story with another woman gives her permission to be honest and authentic and real with me back.
yeah,
And so that's kind of my motto is that I'm going to be forthright and honest and open with you about me. And hopefully that it will give them hope to, want that too.
that they can be honest and real with you. And I think that's what I strive for too, is like
Yeah.
just showing people like you're not so bad that you can't change or that your life can't be different, you know?
Yeah. And I think Laura may have touched on this too, that I think she was talking about that we have our own medicine, and I kind of say the same thing, that we
Mhm.
have answers within us. We're not broken. We don't need to be fixed. We just need to be healed.
Yes. Yes. And sometimes it takes a while to figure out how or find the right person to help or that type of thing because it can be, people are at different levels, right? You might go to a counselor and she might be newer and not know how to work with someone like you, or, she just may not have a great connection with you and understand maybe what you're going through type of thing. So, like, try other people, try different things if it's not,
Yeah.
and keep.
Yeah, because I mean, my style's not for everybody either. I'm confrontive and don't have time to waste, and let's get going. And that doesn't work for everybody. But
Yep.
I want you to get it. I want you to get it quickly, especially. And I think that comes from inpatient treatment. We've only got so much time here. Let's
Right.
not go around with the toothpaste cap.
Let's figure it out. Okay, so tell us, where can we find you if we want to see some stuff about Sheri, your business, all that? What is it called? All of that. If they want to find you, they like you, where do they?
Well, a lot of the patients have labeled that I do Sherapy.
I love that. I love
I
that.
know I need to coin that, for myself, but I haven't. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I have my website,
What's
SheriRowland.com.
SheriRowland.com?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay, so it's all just under your name, right?
yeah. It's all under my name. Yeah, yeah,
Perfect.
yeah,
That's easy
yeah.
enough to remember. And you have an amazing, cool journal, right? Out right now?
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. I have a
Tell
therapy
us.
journal, a coaching journal. I just came out with my coaching journal as well. And it's a great tool, for people in recovery or even not in recovery to have, where you document your progress, and it's all in one location. So I have a therapy journal and a coaching journal. They're almost the same, a little bit different, but almost the same. But yeah, Amazon.com.
Send me a therapy journal.
I will. I will. What's your
I
give
love
me
it. I
your
love
address?
journals.
Yeah, send me your address and I'll send it to you.
I
Yes.
love so I will
Yeah.
definitely rep it and show everybody because I love
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, I have enjoyed having you on so much. You've been like a huge difference maker even in my life, even back then, right? So it's cool to catch up and kind of have people hear from you and kind of what you do, all of that jazz. So thank
Yeah.
you.
I appreciate you so much. I really do.
Bye, guys.